does any of the data, if the data sets get smaller, really change any of what we had already talked about previous? And then maybe open from questions from there. That would be my request.
Larry, you're on mute.
Sorry. Okay. Well, then I'll go ahead and let's anybody else have anything. Okay. So as you know, the last time I was here, and as I said, my computer crashed. I was going to review this a little bit more right beforehand, and I had some computer issues, so I apologize for that. Trying to get those straight before I got here. But so there were a couple of things that were asked last time. One was to look at the all different ages. So each group, and by group, I mean everybody that's 44, everybody that's 45, everybody that's 46, and see how those groups are. Now, some of these groups have one person, but you can see some of these groups have 0 people. And some of them have, I think up to like 7 people, if I'm not mistaken. These are the averages of those groups as to, would they do better? Each individual person, although we're doing the individual calculations, we're, not showing those individual calculations right here. The second thing we were asked was to take a look at, I believe it was 50 basis points above and below what we had generally done, which was at the 5.78% rate of return. So we looked at 5.28% and we looked at 6.28%, which would be 50 basis points above and 50 basis points below. What we found was not surprising for most groups. We're still looking at nobody really benefiting at 55 or 57. I believe that's under all scenarios, regardless of the, regardless of the, even at the 6.28, they're still not benefiting. So 55 and 57, there's really nobody that benefits. And I think we had kind of gone through that last time. Some people thought, that may be too early for people to retire anyway from the teacher system. But that option is available currently to them. So, if somebody was to go out now and leave at 55 or 57, they would be worse off than staying within the Des Moines teacher system. So I don't think that was really a shock to anybody. I think the previous numbers had shown that. When we get to 60, you can see that, and I think we're more looking at with excess earnings, because excess earnings is really what has been the norm, is to give these excess earnings. And you'll see, as we get to 60, at 5.78, we've got a couple of groups, and they're the older groups that benefit. The younger groups do not. And so if we look at the 6 point, and I'm just going to kind of flip to the different returns, because the 6.28 would be a better scenario. And you can see we really, for most, should be in most cases, but I think some of these are so close that you're really only getting one group that's truly benefiting at age 60. So with excess earnings, and again, a lot of this is based off assumptions, as I just said. One of these things is 5.78, one is 6.28, the return on assets. Also, we are, the excess earnings. You can see the difference between excess earnings and 0 excess earnings. So I think this is really one extreme, and this is kind of what's been going on, more or less. There have been, to my knowledge, it looks like y'all have been, and from my conversations with Kathy, it's been pretty consistent to get the excess earnings. So again, at age 60, you're not seeing a lot of the groups benefit. You're seeing some, and these are all within some statistical error, if actual assumptions are not met, if the excess earnings are a little less, or, you might see a few more of these groups benefit. Or if, the rate of return goes up a little bit, you may actually see a few of them benefit less. You may see none of them benefit because really the rate of return going up benefits the Des Moines plan, which is shown over here. Or I mean, it's shown here. Yeah, but you wouldn't benefit. It benefits the Des Moines plan because that's where the earnings come from, and you don't get earnings in the IPERS plan. So, so you can see that. So arguably two groups benefit there. Two groups are on the 0, as you can see, 2 on the -1. And again, all of these could benefit, all of these may not benefit. It really depends on how assumptions are. As you flip to 62, you'll see over in this section, you've got a younger group that's benefiting, and you've got an older group that's benefiting. These people are benefiting, I believe, just because they have hit the age 62 in 20 years. And so they flip over to benefiting. And then you've just got a few more of your older people benefiting. Then if we go to the 6.28 and look at that same age 62 group, you'll see lesser benefiting, and that's because of the less return. I'm looking at 6.28 and 62. So, and if we went all the way down to so you can see the difference when you go to 5.28, if the plan actually did worse than it's done in the past and only was able to get a 5.28% return, since this number is based on the return, you see almost everybody benefits in the other plan. So it's really, that makes a big difference whether the plan is getting 5.28% or getting 6.28%. At 6.28%, not that many benefit. At 5 benefit from going to IPERS, and at 5.28, hold on, I think I said that that backwards, or did I? Hold it. 5.28. Everybody that we had would benefit, or every group, again, these are groups, not individuals, would benefit from going to IPERS, but over Des Moines. So the green is the benefiting. And, then finally at 65, okay, here's the 5.78 at age 65. You start getting more people. This green line just keeps creeping down as the age goes up. You'll see some of the people that were benefiting at 62 are no longer benefiting, because at that point, it's just basically, they're getting the benefit of that unreduced early retirement at age 62. At age 65, everything's unreduced anyway, so their Des Moines benefit again wins out. So at the age 65, you've got the older people benefiting again. And as we go down and take a look at the age 65 here, this is at 6.28. I think we were benefiting at 44 and above a minute ago. And again, you can see these are all within a fairly tight margin of error. At the -1%, 0%, somebody up here would take we'd have to be way off in our assumptions for something to go, to be wrong. But when you're in this area, the 44 to 46 in this case, it could be, one way or the other. You're at 0, you're almost identical at these pieces. So, and then if you look at the 5.28 at 65, you go down all the way to 42, age 42 in the groups. So we did this at every age. We did it at the different return rates. And you know, the results, I guess the 55 and 57, I think are just, you know, if anybody wants to go out at those ages, they're not going to benefit under going to IPERS, regardless of their age, regardless of not regardless of the return. Obviously, if the return was 2%, we'd probably have some benefiting, but benefiting by going to IPERS. But you know, at age 60, we start seeing a flip, and you know, we start seeing a few people. But again, you know, if we're doing our standard kind of baseline assumptions, you know, we're looking at just a few groups, 52 and 53. But again, we've got, you know, 48, 49, 50, and 51 are all kind of very close, you know, and even if you're looking at -2 here, you know, 47 and 46. So again, you know, we kind of get into the same thing we came from before. It's really hard. You know, you're gonna if somebody's gonna stay for a while, you know, stay till a later age, they'll do better, and they may do better in IPERS depending on which group they are. But you know, 50, as long as the excess earnings are there and you keep getting the you know, the 5.78 or somewhere in that ballpark, you're not going to have too many benefit at age 60. It would really kick you to age 62, and then you start having some people that that benefit there. So that's kind of my synopsis of what I've got here. So I guess now we can go to questions.
Are there no questions for Larry? No questions? Okay. Is there a need for Larry to remain on the call, or can Larry go and enjoy the rest of his evening? Larry, if there's no additional questions for you, I'm gonna let you go.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Y'all have a great evening. Bye.
Thank you. Okay, my Alexa just thanked me for saying thank you. In the background, I heard this speaking in the background. So based upon what Larry has shared, what are thoughts, concerns, or next steps from this group?
I would say looking at the questions that Jessica sent before our last meeting, where she said, how best are we going to decide to make a run at IPERS? Is it worth the cost? And what age band?
Jessica, do you want to expound on your questions a little bit there? When you're saying to make a run at IPERS, is that in the current context that we're talking about? Is that a different approach to IPERS?
No, I was just speaking that we've already spent a lot of time chasing IPERS, and it looks like it's not going to benefit really anyone unless we don't get a good return on our investment. So I'm wondering if there's a point where we just say we're not going to chase IPERS anymore because it doesn't seem like it's really going to benefit any of the actives, and instead maybe we need to put our focus on how do we address the inequity in the employer contribution rates, and how do we make sure that our investments are going to get us the returns we need so that members can have a good retirement. That's what I was thinking. I don't know. Does anybody else think we should go after IPERS?
I think for me, the only way I would feel comfortable is if a larger chunk of the active members weighed in on that idea of, you know, the data is clear, and I appreciate the analysis. I mean, I think, you know, we've had this conversation for a couple of years, and we kind of sort of thought one thing and we kind of sort of thought this, and now we know, you know, that if people look at DMTRS and say, I want that option on the table to retire at 55, then moving those folks' diapers would not make sense. In fact, it may consequence them financially, which is something that I don't think any of us would want to do. Going to 57, there are a couple people that may benefit, but again, when you're talking 100 and some people, you don't make a movement over potentially 2 or 3 people getting a tiny gain, and that's still making, that's assuming that our assumptions, probably shouldn't use those words there together, but that everything absolutely perfectly lines up and goes. And so then you start thinking about, well, at age 60, there's a few more people that maybe benefit, again, if assumptions occur. But for me, I take into account that in Des Moines, the average age of retirement for teachers is kind of a lot closer to 58. And we would be nudging them to say, you really now would need to work until you're age 60 in order to even start seeing 1% and 2% gains. It's not until age 62, which I'm not saying that there aren't people who work, you know, who don't stay and teach until 62, but that for me is a gigantic leap to tell a group of workers that in order to see this benefit of going to IPERS, that you would really have to stay employed gainfully with Des Moines Public Schools, staying in DMTRS until you're age 62, and all of the assumptions have to remain true. That's not something that I don't have enough information from members that would say that that would make sense to pursue, you know, at this point. And so I echo with Jessica that for years and years and years, we've talked about that discrepancy. We know that anything we do to address that employee contribution discrepancy helps members. You know, it helps take some of what we talked about there in that report, and it would only improve the conditions. I think that we need to have maybe a more in-depth conversation about where are we at from an investment standpoint. You know, we've created all of these restrictions and rules and parameters on the BTC team, and none of us are interested in going gung-ho and putting huge risk in the plan. But I think all of us look at it and say, there's a necessity to see, can we continue to do a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better in returns, because that floats everyone's boat. That increases the excess earnings for everyone's, that increases the returns for active members. And I think that there's always room for opportunity there that we need to discuss and sit down with, and I say Alan because I see you on the call, you know, have that conversation in the next, you know, 30, 60 days to look at where do we feel comfortable. You know, we have a 70-30 mixture today. I'm always open to having the conversation to providing BTC with more flexibility. Not that that means that they have to go out and make those changes, but they are our experts. We have placed the trust and the ability to best manage that fund. And they've given me no reason but to say, what flexibility do we need to give to them in hopes that we can see slightly better returns? That was my long-winded way of saying I am pretty much in alignment with what Jessica said.
So just a question, Jessica and Blake, do you feel like this information needs to be presented to active so they can, I mean, be aware of the result and why IPERS is off the table? Or, I mean, I'm just curious. I have no idea, you know, what you're thinking about that.
Barb, this is where I struggle as an elected person, because I have to stop and think about, you know, I've been elected to represent them. And when I look at this information, if you said to me right now, we're going to call a vote on whether we should pursue IPERS for this or not, my vote is absolutely no. the number of people who there's too much harm and risk being put on the line and creating assumptions for employment. I'm struggling though with this to say, do we draw a hard, fast line here that says no, knowing that to get information for members on this item, this is not a 30-second email that you read and you ask people to vote. This is not a, hey, go in and watch the DMTRS meeting video and I think you'll be able to understand it. And so yeah. I have struggled for the last 3 meetings with this notion of what does happen to the information. You know, does it go to people? But if you just give it to them, I'm not sure that it's going to completely, the context may not be there.
Well, it's complicated.
Right, it is.
To understand, and that just makes it difficult.
I think for me, it's more of, you know, if members come back and say, where are you at, then I would want to say to them, you know, the reason right now that I'm a no is because the indicators just say that it's not beneficial for a majority. And because of that, I stop and I go, man, to make a change when I know that some people and maybe even a majority aren't going to benefit. And now I'm telling you, you're going to have to work until at least age 62 likely to really get some benefit. Those are some assumptions we're fighting.
Yeah. Yep.
My understanding, and correct me, Kathy, if I'm mistaken, my understanding is that there's going to be the people who might make the move over to IPERS are 19, 20 people. That's not the majority of actives in my mind. And so am I right in that? And then within that small group of people who have that option to go, it has to be okay for everybody. If it is not good for even one, it's off the board. Is this correct, Kathy?
You are correct, Lola.
So saying we're talking about majority of actives, that's not accurate or correct in my way of thinking. And I'm sorry that all of them, if there are those who do move, I'm sorry that they all can't, but with the understanding, you know, that would be real important if we go through this, that all of the actives understand and recognize that it's not to their benefit to make that move over, whether they, you know, the mindset has been that you go to IPERS, you're going to make big bucks over Des Moines teachers retirement. And that's not what we're looking at. That's not the situation.
I think the important differentiation there is some of the prior discussions were moving people to IPERS with credit for service. That is a whole different conversation than the conversation we're having today of moving and having them start over. And I think I'm hearing consensus with this group that you are not comfortable in advancing that recommendation to move people to IPERS starting over. And so that we're moving off the table, if I'm hearing this group correctly. And now we need to decide, where do we go from here? I know that there was a proposal eons ago about putting additional monies toward individuals who are still actively participating in DMTRS in the form of an employer contribution. We had talk of doing it within the plan, and we had talk of doing it outside of the plan. I'm going to give you my 2 cents worth, and then you guys can talk amongst and figure out what you want to advance or how you want to advance. My thought is still outside of the plan. Number one, it's quicker and easier to set that up and get that going. And I know time is money in this situation. Number two, it gives you a little bit more investment flexibility, which I think is an important concept. I realize it's not going to be huge money going into there, but every bit of investment flexibility matters in this situation. So that's kind of where I stand, but I want you guys to talk about it and figure out where you stand, and then hopefully we can get some type of recommendation together to advance from here.
So that was the 457 plan that we that we talked about quite a while ago, correct?
Yeah, 457, 401A.
Okay.
Lots of different numbers, letters.
And, you know, Matt Smith had stated that there just was no more money currently to do anything, correct? But perhaps that's something we could propose, that when there is some funding, we could get that started. I think the other thing is follow up with what Blake said, just talking about our investment mix at our next meeting, perhaps, and maybe getting the most recent report on how we're doing, and maybe talk about giving BTC more flexibility. And I'm with Blake on that. Giving them more flexibility doesn't mean that they have to take it. And
Right.
they certainly have done a good job with managing that. And I understand that that would have to go to the board for approval as well, but that would be my thought.
I agree.
Yeah, I think Kathy, I don't, there's pros and cons to whether an increase to the employer contribution occurs. I think that for me, the pros and cons actually go on both sides in terms of the actual management and operation of the plan. There are things that you say is good. There are things for the employee that are good. I think a 401A, for me, they literally are a wash in terms of priority. I think that, we know that the amount is always going to be the debate. I think for me is how do we get past that point and let the school board, the trustees, make that decision within, Barb, to address your question, my hope, and of course I'm full of all kinds of hopes and dreams on this snowy day, is that, that this coming year's budget, 23-24, that it will be built in, that there'll be the mechanism to say, whatever the amount is, and I don't want to dismiss and say that it should be a pittance of money as if it's a sympathy that's going out there. I mean, I hope that it is an amount that is meaningful and impactful for all the reasons that we've labored about for the last 3 years. But for me, I don't want to bog down the process because of the number. It's to me, if management, if Kathy, if you, Shashank, and Mr. Smith, look at this and say, there's kind of a preference towards one of those two methods, I think that makes it easier, at least for me, to say, let's lean that direction. Let's start something, go down that pathway. Let's have that conversation at the school board level. We have to figure out kind of sort of how we summarize the things that happen with this IPERS discussion, because they're going to want to know that, and let the board of directors make the decision about what's the right amount of money that they believe makes sense for DMTRS people at this time. And I agree with you all that, the next meeting or two, let's talk about the investment mixture. Let's see where we are. It's been kind of a while since we've really dug into the reports, and then I think another agenda item that we need to do at some point, and Kathy has this on her plan, is that we got to go through that plan document and kind of clean it up and figure out what it means. But that's sort of my 2 cents on what you shared, Kathy.
So if I'm going to summarize, we have 3 things that we want to do. 1, we want to make a recommendation that we address inequity in our contribution rates. And whether that is within the plan or outside the plan, I don't think it really matters really one way or the other, as long as we can get some contribution, increased contribution, whichever way would make the most sense and be the easiest for the board to figure out. Certainly, I would have a preference for something that's quicker, because time is money and we have been sitting on this for so long, and we need to move. That's 1. Number 2, really looking at our investment mix and giving BTC an opportunity to have a little bit more flexibility to help us get greater returns for all members. And then number 3, looking at our plan document and really kind of cleaning up and strengthening that document a little bit with all the upheaval of the recent past.
Good summary, Jessica.
It's my specialty.
I get, Kathy, my question for you is, what else do you feel like is needed from this group to advance something that may impact the 23-24 budget, knowing that those discussions are very deep and ongoing right now? you know, what can we provide? How do we engage with, you know, with Mr. Smith, with Mr. Aurora, the other chiefs on that issue, so that if something can happen, it does happen this year, that is in front of the board.
Right. I'm wondering if this committee shouldn't prepare just a short written request of what they're asking. And again, you can put in it that you will, if you want to put a monetary amount in it, you can, but you can also put something in it that says, you know, we don't want to put a monetary amount to this. We would like the board to decide what they feel is fair and for us. But just that we would like to increase the contribution level in the manner that's most expeditious that we can get done, and with a goal of having this effective no later than 7/1. And I think to have something in writing that I can present to them rather than me just saying, hey, this group kind of wants to do this. And I think it strengthens that conversation. And then after I have that conversation, if they want to come back to this committee at all for any clarifications or anything before they go to the board, I think that would be the next step. That would be my thought.
All sounds good to me.
Was there something that was written previously when we first talked about this that
There
we already
is.
have?
There is.
Yeah, I mean, Barb, we have from April 1st, our recommendation. Now, granted, that was just specific to the employer contribution, but we had already made a motion unanimously to recommend that it go to 11% and be one flat amount that went to everybody at DMTRS regardless. And then we never really formalized the 401A conversation. You know, there was one point sort of behind the scenes where there was discussion about perhaps it being, you know, in that 1 to 1.5% range. And that's where the conversation sort of derailed, because this body had spent 6 months working on and landed at 11%, which was really about 3%. And, you know, all the math that went into that. And so, you know, we have that as I don't know at what point it expires.
I think like maybe what needs to be clarified for Matt and Shashank would be, is this group still in favor of a flat amount for everybody? So everybody gets the same, or are you in favor of everybody gets a 2% or, you know, a specific percentage increase over what their current is up to, but not to exceed X? So if you were currently getting 6% and somebody else was getting 5% contribution, and we're going to increase it by 3, that remains the same for both of you get a 3%. But if you were already getting, you know, 8% or 8.5, something that you would then exceed 11, that yours would be capped at 11 or whatever. I just don't know what, I want to make sure that we're very clear on what we're asking for, so it doesn't get tripped up in the details and lost and delayed again.
So what's most fair?
Mm-hmm.
Fair and quick.
Yeah, I think the most fair is, of course, a cap up to, because, you know, some of the people who are in DMTRS, this is their second time. They've already retired and they're joining DMTRS. Those folks are getting the highest contribution rate. It's the people who have been with the Des Moines public school system since they started that are having the lowest contribution rate. So I think having a cap makes sense.
But if you brought everybody up to 11, Jessica, let's just say an example, if you brought everybody up to 11, then those people who started a long time ago are going to get the most benefit of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
so
that's what I'm saying. But if we went up to a cap, I'm agreeing with you, Kathy. We go up to a particular cap, because it doesn't make sense to give 13 to people who just joined, right?
Right.
That makes sense.
Oh, for sure.
So going up to a cap makes sense.
Yeah, and that was
the most fair.
Yeah, correct. That was why we originally, I mean, we struggled with what was the right number. We landed on the 11 because we looked at it and said, you know, it sort of addresses that at minimum, we've been discussing this problem pretty elaborately since 2017. We knew that gap was still in existence. And so there was sort of a premise to say, close it here. And as Jessica has said, the employee who started earliest, which you could probably debate and argue, maybe the employee that if there was a sense of obligation to do the most for, it's the person who started their career youngest, earliest, and is still here and maybe on a trajectory now to stay here their entire career. I think that gets to be a little harder to articulate if we think about, and I guess I'll throw this out to everyone else, is would we say that, let's say we go to a 401A, would we do the exact same thing? And we would say your 401A contribution would be your DMTRS employer contribution rate less the 11%, and that's the amount that it would be. So in other words, it's the exact same amount, regardless of whether it's the 401A decision or it's the employer contribution rate number. And then again, knowing that if the board or the superintendent, says that number is too high, then we say, okay, well then bring the 11% number down.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense to everyone? I'm not sure how easily I can articulate that in writing, but that's what's in my brain.
No, I certainly understand what you're saying. I do think it's hard to make it clear in writing, however.
Group, how do you want to proceed with getting something in writing? Does somebody want to take a crack at starting it and then circulating it so everybody gets a chance to weigh in? Do we need to vote on this now? So that way we sort of have an official vote on record, assuming as we look around, I'm trying to judge to see if we even have technically a quorum.
I believe we do. I think all of our representatives are here, except our community representatives.
Yeah.
Don't everybody jump to be the one to volunteer to start the writing to get the. Oh, is this one? Are the arrows pointing at my direction and I just can't see them?
Yep, they are.
That's a yes, Blake.
All right, so let's be.
So
Let's
Kathy's
be.
great at fine tuning it, and Jessica too, in the simplest, most understandable form. And that's what we need. We don't want to lose them 10 pages later. It has to be short, sweet, succinct. And if they need clarification, we can do that.
Okay, so without objection from anyone, I'll write up something. I'll try to simplify in terms of really the two options in terms of addressing that employer contribution gap. I will circulate it to everyone for your feedback, and then as soon as I kind of get everyone's marker, Kathy, you'll be circulated in on the original messages too, but then I'll kind of give you the nod that this is good to go, and then Kathy, you can let me know whether you want me or us or whomever to send it to Mr. Smith and to Mr. Aurora, and I'll try to be expeditious, try to work on that this weekend.
That would be great. I think we're moving in the right direction. We got to get moving on this so we can get it done.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I feel like we have done our due diligence in checking all options. We can honestly say we've, looked under every rock and looked everywhere, and this is the best option for us at this point in time.
Alan Goody, because you're on, can I ask, as we were talking earlier, is there any more specific information that we can provide to you in terms of what we're sort of looking for you is maybe some guidance and direction about if we are to provide a little bit more flexibility in the investment mix, sort of what it enables you to do, not that it's saying that it's going to, make the rates of return shift to X, Y, or Z, but I think I'm just curious if there's anything else that we can help provide to you so that we can have that conversation, and does the next meeting, which would be what, February Sorry, long pause. Which would be February 8th.
Does it have to be February? We're meeting every month. Do we really need to meet February?
I think if we want to get that shift in the investment mixture, I think it would be important to do that. And the review of the plan document is going to take some time.
I think the February meeting to BTC can go over year-end financials that we have not had an opportunity to go over, and then that will provide us some context for those additional investment conversations.
Hey, Blake, this is Alan. To change the asset allocation, it has to be approved by the board.
Right.
Officially approved. So, and I don't know how much time or effort it takes to get a request on their agenda. So basically, you can look at the investment policy statement, and that has the approved investment guidelines in it. So, for example, we're allowed to take an equity weight. The equity portion of the portfolio can be up to 30%. It used to be 20. I think it used to be lower than that. So more or less, we can talk about it in the next meeting, but the general gist of it is that if you want to allow us to take it up to 50%, you could go ahead and ask the board for that right now and get on their agenda as soon as you can. So the more flexibility we have, the wider those bands are, the more we can do. But even with that said, if you take a look at the plan document, you're going to see that, let's say for some reason we did increase the equity by a significant amount, and the equity market went up 20%. I believe in the plan document, and Kathy, you can correct me if this is wrong, but that doesn't mean that those large excess profits just automatically get paid out. There are limits on what gets paid out each fiscal year. And so a large gain would maybe increase the payout in a particular year. But really the bulk of it would likely just go towards improving the funding status of the plan, which is very good already. It would be retained in the plan though, and it wouldn't just be a windfall for everyone in the plan in that particular year. Does that make sense, Blake?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I know that we have distribution over 3-year windows that we use. I totally get that. For me, it's
gains harvested.
Yeah, correct. And we've had conversations with you all before where we've talked about the exceeding any one company stock, and Walmart always comes up. And I struggle because every time we've looked at that, it's actually Walmart has done well for us. And I just look at that and I say, is that something that you would come back to us and say, hey, if there was a little bit more flexibility there, it may allow us to have a little more options, more flexibility, maybe less constraints towards what we're trying to do and function. And so I guess that's really my ask, is if there are things that you look at that you say, something that we would encourage you to look at would be A, B, or C within those constraints, so that we can discuss and maybe more clearly pinpoint some of those pieces. And I'm just picking on that one because that's one that I've heard over and over and over again.
Yeah, I think the main thing is it's just purely how much equity and how much fixed income, or how much equity can we have. That's the big one. And an individual security, and with respect to Walmart, you're referring to the limit on how much of an individual company can we have as an investment in the portfolio, stock and bonds combined, and it's 2%. That's really that's an important factor, but the biggest factor by far is how much equity can we have. Equity is what drives growth in a portfolio. Fixed income provides income for the most part, and so your number one thing really is you could make a request to the board. Can we increase that up? Can we go up to 40%? And if they want us to make comments about, well, what additional risk does that entail? We can have that conversation if they would like. But yeah, just focus on the equity see if you can get the equity from 30 to 40%, and then we can have a conversation about what we might do. The rest of it is really fairly secondary to that single thing.
Okay, I appreciate that. I would have not recognized it that way from our conversation, so thank you.
Does that work, Kathy?
Yes. So to wrap up, do we already have a February meeting schedule? I haven't even looked. February seems like forever away and it's really not.
Yep.
We do, February 8th.
8th. Okay. So let's, for February 8th, let's have BTC on the agenda. We can talk about investment information. Hopefully prior to February 8th, we will have information that will be ready to be sent to Superintendent Smith and Shashank Arora for their consideration. And then in the February meeting, we can devise a plan to start working on the plan document.
Okay.
Good?
Sounds good.
Kathy, can I ask, has the board approved the new members of this committee?
Rosie,
Not yet.
Okay, we probably need that to go to the
Okay.
board.
Okay, I can put that for February 7th meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Blake. That was an oversight on my part. I thought we had done that.
I want Rich to be official here.
I was gonna say, Rich, you're here. So we can do that. And Rosie, if you need information from us, like from me regarding the timeframe of their term, I can't even put words together today. I can get that to you too, so you know how long
Nope.
each person's term is.
I have that.
Okay,
I just have to
great.
get it on their agenda. Thank you.
You're so good, Rosie. Thank you.
Thank-
All right, I'm going to, with that, close the meeting because I don't think we have anything else. I appreciate everybody logging on and participating, and I think we're making progress, guys.
You too. Thanks.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thanks,
Thank you for
everybody.
Thank you.
writing.
Uh-huh.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Take care, folks.
Yeah,
Bye.
well.